Women play a significant role in every society. They are our mothers, sisters, daughters, nieces, or even aunts. And they have shaped the lives of each and every one of us. And that's why a day is dedicated to celebrate the achievements made by women. With the theme of Embrace Equity, World of Africa this week spotlights on African women who are making a change, one way or the other. Welcome to the program. I'm Eric Njoka. We begin in the Sahel, where a woman called Aja has become a new phenomenon in Burkina Faso. This is her right here. Many people, desperate of a nation buffeted by poverty and ravaged by a bloody insurgency, flock to Aja's village to be healed. What sets her apart is that she is a woman, because most traditional healers across the continent are men. Here's a report from Ouagadougou.
A line of cars and motorcycles cuts across the arid West African landscape, kicking up clouds of dust on the unpaved road. Their destination, Togenpeol. This village, 30 kilometers south of Burkina Faso's capital, Ouagadougou, has become a magnet for the sick and the desperate. Thousands come here to seek help, either for themselves or a loved one. From a 20-year-old woman named Aja, whose reputation for healing powers has spread across the country.
At the beginning of the madness, I told my parents I'm not crazy, but they refused. There was a 3-year-old who could not walk, so I swore with my life that day that I would treat him for 12 days and the child would walk. When I gave medicines, the child there got up on the 11th day and started walking. So on the 12th day, people started to suspect. Others say it's madness and some say it's not madness.
Aja is the nickname of Amsetu Nikiema. The young woman says that she was haunted by visions during her childhood in rural Burkina Faso and, as a result, suffered cruelty at the hands of her family. 3 years ago, word spread that she had carried out a miraculous healing. From there, her reputation snowballed.
Aja's fame comes from her integrity. When you come to her by the grace of God, your problem finds a solution. Whatever your problem, you find a solution.
I was tending all the time. It was little by little, but I had a lot of powers. But people abused me so much. I could not even work quietly. It was like that. Today, I don't even know why God gave me powers to this point. If I get up and say I want this, He gives me. If I see someone sick and I say that I'll help him, He helps the person.
Officially, just 9% of Burkina Faso's population say they are animists. But this figure is widely considered to be an underestimate. Traditional beliefs run deep, often coexisting among the country's Muslim majority and Christians, and the authorities are tolerant of self-proclaimed healers.
I never tire out because I love people. If I'm working, I love it. So whoever loves his work never tires.
Experts in mental health say that Burkina Faso, one of the poorest countries in the world, can offer little support by way of conventional medicine for people with psychological problems. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
It was one of Berlin's most talked about films because of the standout performance from a non-professional actor called Muajem Hussein. The Survival of Kindness is a deliberately obscure film. Hussein arrived in Australia some 17 years ago as a refugee from the Democratic Republic of the Congo and now earns a living as a social worker. Her fight for equity in film hasn't gone unnoticed. Here now is her story.
Muanjemi Hussein had never set foot inside a cinema before she auditioned for the lead role in a film. She auditioned for a film by one of Australia's most celebrated directors. Growing up in a village in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, there were no cinemas. In her 20s, fleeing war, she lived for 8 years in a refugee camp in Tanzania with her husband and children. She grew up in a poor family in the DRC's South Kivu region. When she was 13, an ethnic conflict broke out between her mother and father's families. Later, after the family was granted asylum in Australia, there was simply no time. With no dialogues, she captured her character's resilience, determination to stay alive, her compassion and her rage. Every gesture is beautifully expressive.
I lived surviving every day because my family was poor where when I was living, when I was a teenager. It was not easy to find even food, shoes. As you can see, people are not sure how I made it walking barefoot. But it was part of my life because I grew up without shoes. I was going to school in high school without shoes.
Rolf de Heer, a Dutch-born Australian director, explains how he scouted for Muanjemi and why she stood out for him.
You know, there's no pool of actors in South Australia that includes choices about, you know, black women of that age. You know, they just aren't there because the parts aren't there for them. And in some ways, Muanjemi was a bigger risk because she was so out of the loop of that cultural business that has to do with acting and so on. But I thought with her, the chances were that we could get something great. With this other woman, it would be good, and it probably would never be bad. With Muanjemi, it could be bad, but it might be great.
The film follows black woman as she escapes the cage and walks barefoot across a hellish landscape. She evades being captured by more masked white men who are rounding up people of color and putting them to work in chains. Hussein has lived through her fair share of trauma in real life.
We should encourage everyone to support and to make sure to advocate for those who don't have a say. Many people are suffering in silence, for example. If we have opportunity to speak on their behalf, people should speak on their behalf.
Her lead role in The Survival of Kindness got recognition. She was nominated at the Berlin Film Festival. Who was nervous at first about performing, now encourages others, especially those who are marginalized. She also campaigns for gender equity. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
It was a hotly contested poll pitting three main challenges to replace President Muhammadu Buhari. At the end, the godfather of Nigeria, Bola Tinubu, became the country's president-elect. For some, Peter Obi would have made a better leader because he was considered young. So what happened to the millions of young voters who registered en masse with the hope of bringing change to Africa's most populous nation? Let's find out from this next report by Louisa Olaniyi.
Nigeria's recently concluded national election was one of the most extraordinary. From the heated electioneering campaigns to voting day tensions and enthusiasm among youth, to the election umpire's alleged inconsistencies and post-election violence, the process has been dramatic. Congratulatory messages as well as criticism continue to trail the victory of President-elect Senator Bola Ahmed Tinubu, who convincingly defeated his closest rival Atiku Abubakar of the People's Democratic Party (PDP) and Peter Obi of the Labour Party (LP). Tinubu won a simple majority of the votes polled. However, the close contest has drawn criticism from international observers and stirred a debate over the provision that requires the winner to not only have more votes, but also 25% of the votes cast in all the states. The constitutional provision has come under great scrutiny now.
First off, what I expect him to do is, first of all, douse the anger and the tension. Upon assumption of office, And particularly, we are given 100 days. I'm particularly looking at the first day. And that first day, the actions he's going to take will tend to douse the tension and bring the markets and the polity under control. First of all, his inaugural speech, he must be magnanimous in victory and treat himself as a president of Nigeria, not a president of any political party.
Presidential candidate of the PDP Atiku Abubakar and Labour Party Peter Obi have since rejected the results and vowed to prove to the court how they won the election. Peter Obi, who wept at a press conference, accused the Independent National Electoral Commission (INEC) of tampering with existing data of voters. Supporters of the Labour Party, on their part, described the outcome of the polls as a mandate stolen in broad daylight, while supporters of the APC say it is a victory well-deserved.
I enjoyed the fact that people voted. There was a good voting process and all of that, and I would also say that I'm happy that a lot of Nigerians who before now have never gotten involved in the electoral process got involved in it, So that is a pass mark for Nigerians. It's a pass mark for all those who believe in democracy. It's a pass mark for all those who believe in good governance. It's a pass mark for all those who believe that it is their right to be able to elect the leader as they want.
The election is not free and fair. For Peter Obi going to court, I pray he wins, but you know how things work in Nigeria. When they announce the winner, the case might be in the court for 8 years.
Meanwhile, the country's problems such as insecurity, unemployment, a declining economy and the cash crunch as a result of the Naira redesign policy have not yet been addressed. The recent Supreme Court ruling declaring as invalid the directive as well as the implementation of the Naira redesign policy of the federal government has seen mixed reactions.
Peter Obi going to court, I think, is a good one, and he shouldn't be discouraged, because if the Supreme Court can give a verdict countering that of the federal government, that means there is hope for Peter Obi. That's what I think. There is hope for Peter Obi.
The Naira redesign policy, according to the Central Bank of Nigeria, is to enable it to take control of the Naira in circulation, manage inflation and combat both counterfeiting and ransom payment to kidnappers. Some analysts have described the Naira redesign policy as a painful route for tackling the corrupt practice of vote buying.
The victory of the APC presidential candidate Bola Ahmed Tinubu as Nigeria's president-elect at the just concluded elections has not been without criticisms. Opposition parties have since rejected the announcement by the election umpire, threatening to challenge the outcome in court. A cross-section of Nigerians, especially young ones, think the election was riddled with anomalies. In a separate press conference, the Labour Party candidate Peter Obi described the victory as a stolen mandate, while the PDP candidate Atiku Abubakar called it a rape of democracy. Peter Obi has since filed a court case. Analysts are foreseeing legal fireworks in the coming weeks, as it is the proper means of seeking redress by aggrieved parties. Meanwhile, the president-elect has called for calm and unity among the rivals in building the nation, as the challenges ahead for the country are enormous. From Lagos, Nigeria, Louisa Olaniyi, WION, World is One.
Let's now talk about nature. The poorest around the world are bearing the burden of preserving wildlife, according to a study by Australian researchers. Cattle herders and farmers in Africa regularly see their livestock killed or their crops decimated without any compensation because cash from NGOs and wildlife charities is barely enough to cover conservation. Here's a report from Kenya.
As more and more humans encroach on wildlife habitats, the human-animal conflict is on the rise here in Kajiado. Nearly 100 kilometers from the capital of Nairobi, farm workers like Elizabeth Naosha have little faith in the compensation system.
Lions are very problematic as they kill our cattle at night. The Kenya Wildlife Service usually records our ordeals, but it takes so many years for us to be compensated. We thus see no need in reporting the attacks, and so we just let the lions eat our livestock.
Families like Naosha's don't just lose an animal when there's a predator. Researchers say the impact is more dramatic as farmers in developing countries are already under a financial squeeze.
We found that countries on average living in the developing economies, mainly in the global south, that live alongside carnivores, species like cheetahs, lions, tigers, they suffer about an 8 times higher economic vulnerability when you compare them to developed economies, say in the United States, in Sweden, Norway.
Kenyan conservationists say that the current system does not work because no governments have been able to pay proper compensation. For their survival, killing the predator is the easiest option for the family.
The only way that you can actually stop the thing from happening is either put in a deterrent system or kill the perpetrator. The latter is the simplest way in a lot of cases.
Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
A man in Luzira, Uganda, has found a unique way to recycle plastics by making a large vessel made entirely out of plastic waste and eco-friendly materials. James Katiba hopes his creation, called Floating Island, will encourage recycling and end littering in Lake Victoria. Take a look.
Flowering plants rise as if magically from Lake Victoria onto a wooden boat, giving it a leafy ambience that enchants many visitors. The attraction becomes more compelling when tourists learn that the greenery emerges from an innovative recycling project. Thousands of dirt-encrusted plastic bottles have been creatively used to anchor the boat. Former tour guide James Katiba started building the boat in 2017. He wanted to find a solution to dispose of tons of plastic waste ending up in the lake when it rains heavily. Next, he realized that the boat can also be an example of a sustainable business on the shores of Uganda's Lake Victoria. A floating restaurant and bar that could be unmoored to drift for pleasure.
The vessel is anchored using cords attached to the mainland. It's sitting on a minimum of 10 tons of plastic bottles. It could hold up to about 100 to 120 people in comfort.
Africa's Lake Victoria, the world's second largest freshwater lake, which spans 3 countries, is plagued by pollution including runoff waste, sand mining and a decline in water levels, in part due to climate change. Layers of plastic waste float near some beaches during the rainy season. A visible sign of pollution that's a worry for fishing communities heavily dependent on the lake.
Bottles get into Lake Victoria from runoff water, like when it rains. Most times actually it's runoff water that's not properly managed from the mainland. They end up in the lake, and at times people just throw them carelessly as they do. They go to their day by day work.
Katiba's boat has become a huge attraction for people who visit the island from various parts of the country. His efforts for conservation is also paying off as the roots from the fig trees and shrubs provide a breeding ground for fish.
He has big island actually, but I never heard anything like this in Africa. Special that you're using the bottles which are collected from the Lake of Victoria. Yes, which is a big plus, because you're not only cleaning the environment, but also you're providing something unique, very unique.
A similar project was launched in 2018 from the beaches of the Kenyan coast, involving building of a small boat known as the flip-floppy, entirely from plastic waste collected from sandy shores and towns. In 2021, the flip-floppy went on a voyage of Lake Victoria in order to raise awareness about the pollution plaguing the region's most critical freshwater ecosystem. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Filmmakers converged in Burkina Faso for the Pan-African Film and Television Festival of Ouagadougou called Fespaco. Since the last edition, the country has suffered 2 military coups, but that did not get in the way of this year's event, which prominently featured strong women. Check out this next report.
The hall roared when Burkina Faso junta leader Ibrahim Traoré walked in. Filmmakers converged for the Pan-African Film and Television Festival of Ouagadougou, Fespaco. Since the last edition, the country has suffered 2 military coups, but that didn't get in the way of this year's event. The film festival prominently featured strong women leading the way. A total of 170 entries were selected. This included 15 fiction films in contention for the Yenenga Golden Stallion Award and a prize of around $30,000.
On a discuté de tout. We discussed everything and never went to a vote. I was allowed 2 votes, but we didn't need that. We all agreed and everything was decided upon unanimously. It was great. It's a great jury.
Formidable, c'est un jury formidable.
Apolline Traoré was in the race for the main prize, the Golden Stallion of Yenenga, for her film Sira. This trophy is a tribute to strong women. Princess Yenenga was a warrior who went into battle on her stallion, fearing nothing and no one.
I'm very happy to have at least got the silver. It's true that we were all hoping for gold, but we did not get it. But it doesn't matter. We will keep fighting. This is the 4th time I've fought in this competition. We'll have a 5th time, a 6th time, and next time. Even if it's not me, someone else will. We are going to bring this trophy home.
Fespaco only showcases films by Africans. The aim is to offer them a platform to show their skills and not to feature films from the USA or Europe to the local population. However, it is not easy to organize a film festival in a country where many inhabitants live in poverty and suffer from recurring droughts. There are only 4 cinemas, far too few for the large crowds at Fespaco. The organizers improvised and screened them as open-air films. Since its inception, the festival has been held every 2 years, with few exceptions. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
It's a wrap on this episode of World of Africa. Thank you very much for your time and for watching. Find us on all our social media platforms and talk to us there. We always appreciate feedback. I'm Eric Njoka. I will see you on the next show.